Our next portion of the unit of Africa, we're going to look at South Africa, and in particular, apartheid. And so it's important we understand the impact of individuals in various systems of government to understand changes in civil rights and liberties. And we're going to examine how racist government policies led to inequalities that are still present in today's society. We're going to do that by looking at some of the racist policies of South Africa and how that led to segregation and inequality. And then we might take a look at American society and see if there's any comparisons to South Africa. The other thing is to understand the interaction and influence between individuals and various groups. We need to know the impact of one influential person on the masses to change their community. And we're going to look at Nelson Mandela, how he was that influential person that changed South Africa. So I'm going to ask you to be thinking about what decade do you think all these laws happened? Population Registration Act required that every African be classified into one of the number of racially populated groups. Race Classification Act, every citizen suspected of not being European was classified according to race. Pass Laws Act required blacks over the age of 16 to carry passbooks everywhere at all times. Reservation of Separate Amenities Act allowed public premises, vehicles, and service to be segregated by race, even if equal facilities were not made available. So this would be like separate busing, separate schooling, different drinking fountains, all of that. Group Areas Act, it meant you had to live in a designated area. You couldn't live in other areas. Mixed Marriage Act outlawed marriage between different races. Immorality Act, police would track down racially mixed couples suspected of being in relationships. The Black Education Act, huge provisions enforcing separate educational facilities so blacks and whites couldn't go to school together. And last, the Extension of University Act made it a criminal offense for non-white students to even register to go to the university without first approval from the Minister of Internal Affairs. So, if you hadn't guessed, it's the 90s. Pretty shocking. Now, you may think that was forever ago, but the 90s were not that long ago. It seems pretty recent for many of these acts. And South Africa's policy of separation is called apartheid. So we're going to take a look. We're going to watch this video. I want you to be thinking about these questions that you'll answer. What is apartheid? Where was this happening? When did it end? And who helped it end?
Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first democratically elected president in 1994. It was the official end of white minority rule, otherwise known as apartheid. Apartheid, you've heard of it, but what exactly was it? I'm Francesca Fiorentini, and this is AJ+. Apartheid is an Afrikaans word that means separateness. It was a system of racial segregation that governed South Africa for nearly 50 years. It specifically aimed to protect the domination of the white South Africans over non-whites in every aspect of life. But it didn't just appear out of thin air. During the colonial grab for the country between the Dutch-descended Afrikaners and the British, the rights of native black South Africans were sidelined. So when apartheid was officially made law in 1948 by the Afrikaner-led National Party, it was a continuation of injustices already happening. Afrikaners believed that South Africa was their God-given homeland, and that the white race was superior. The black majority was therefore seen as a threat. There were 148 apartheid laws. Blacks had to carry ID permits at all times and had to obey strict curfews. Public facilities were separated for white and non-white use, and marriages between whites and other races were banned. People were classified into 4 racial categories: white, black, Indian, and colored, people of mixed race. And they were all separated into different residential areas. Blacks were divided into 10 so-called homelands based on tribal groups. Homelands were rural, overcrowded, and lacked jobs, forcing blacks to seek work as migrant laborers. Wages were low, and it was illegal for workers to strike. See, apartheid was also economically motivated. A cheap workforce was needed particularly to work in the country's gold mines. Powerful mining magnates had a huge stake in apartheid policies since their profits depended on keeping black wages low. Outside their designated homelands, non-whites had no political rights. Since they were not technically citizens, they couldn't vote. Education? Also divided. The state set up a separate education system for blacks that received a fraction of the funding that white schools did. Mandatory education ended at age 13 and was structured to funnel blacks into menial migrant labor. Exploitation by design. Needless to say, there was resistance to these insane laws. Protests were often led by black students and youth and were met with severe repression. Out of these struggles came leaders like Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, and Walter Sisulu, who would help bring an eventual end to apartheid. So now that you know what apartheid was, could you imagine living under it? Are there any similarly unjust laws that still exist where you live? Leave us your comments below. Peace.
All right, so answer these questions. What is apartheid? Where was this happening? When did it end? Who helped it end? You're going to read now TCI, moving on in your module, to find out some more information about South Africa and apartheid.